Why is it so dark? Okay. Hi. This is my little video on a book review. I actually really love reading, and right now I'm in my classics phase yet again, and I've always loved classics, but right now I'm just like gobbling them down, and I just bought a $30 complete Barnes and Noble collection of Jane Austen's 7 novels. So yes, I am indulging very heavily in my love of classics, but beyond that, I am secretly a lover of romance and romantic classics. Um, okay, so at this point, I am just rambling about Jane Austen, so let's speed it up. This is about the Emily Brontë and her book, Wuthering Heights. And I'm going to go over my opinions of the book, having read chapters 1 through 7 and a little bit of chapter 8, but I'm not going to talk about. Actually, I think I will be talking about chapter 8 a little bit, but that doesn't matter too much. So we're just going to get into it. So the first thing that I want to talk about is pros and cons, and I don't have a teleprompter, so I'm just using my laptop to keep track of my notes. So if I'm looking off to the side and it's awkward and not smooth or professional, that's why, because I'm 20. So there's that. But we're gonna start off with the cons first. Something that I found to be a con, which may speak to the fact that I'm not as elevated of an intellectual as I thought I was, is the yappery. These classic girlies love to yap, and I'm sorry, but for a lot of it, it is completely and totally unnecessary. Like, Miss Emily Brontë will have a character just go off on a monologue about how much they hate somebody, or like how I actually didn't give a fuck that this person was crying, and they can go and like kick rocks, like, and da 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 da, and just all of this yappery that really has nothing to do with the prose. And what I meant to say here was plot. Like, there is a speech that one of the characters gives just randomly, and it is so unnecessary. I wish that I could find it. But it seems as though I cannot. Which might be for the better. Mr. Lockwood is the character who gives this speech. Like, one of the character who's telling him this story, Nellie, the story of Wuthering Heights. I'm currently doing it. The Emily Brontë, Jane Austen, Charlotte Brontë effect. The yappery. I'm not even going to get into it. Yes, I am. She starts talking about the story, and she pauses and she's like, I've been talking your ear off. We should probably end the conversation. And this man is like, no. And instead of just saying, no, please continue, I'd like to hear the rest of the story, he's like, I understand that people like you don't get enough like conversation or whatever. And it's I skipped over it, so I actually can't speak to what he was saying, but it was a very exhaustive monologue for no reason. So I'm not joking. He literally identifies the monologue as a speech of which the other character is tired of listening to. I will say there is some monologuing in there that may pull you out of the narrative and the importance of the story, which again may seem so obnoxious and pretentious, and like, just let people like speak. Let the writers write, like, let them fill their pages. But also, fill your pages in a way that actually makes me want to read your story. And Miss Emily, I will continue to read the story, but, like, she has a way of pulling you out of the narrative with the random yappery. Especially by this loser man, Lockwood. Like, nobody cares. So, there's that. The next con, offensive language, which we'll get into. It's not so much as a con as it is a trigger warning. For those who may take serious offense to outdated language or
slurs.
Particularly if you're Romani, there is a particular word that was oftentimes, and I assume still is, used against Romani people that has been highly contested on whether or not it is or is not a slur. I'm pretty sure the consensus among Romani folk is that it is a slur, so I'm gonna say it is a slur. And I don't say it. But if you know what it is, you know what it is. And that's that on that. Caitlin from the Void yet again. So slurs are a net bad, and I highly recommend not saying them unless you are part of the group that has reclaimed the slur that you were trying to say, because you will get jumped, and I will be recording. So, I feel like the use of the slur against Heathcliff is a realistic depiction, which is why I'm not like huffing and puffing my chest super hard about the presentation of slurs throughout the story. However, I will say it is difficult to watch a person of color or a character who is coded to be a person of color be degraded like that. So read at your own risk. The next con is that this book is very poorly marketed given the modern day because let it be known, this is not a romance. At least not a traditional or typical romance. I recently watched a Shakespeare video because Shakespeare is one of my favorite YouTubers, video essayists, intellectuals, academics, I should say. And I don't mean to say that in an elitist way, even though I just did. But they're a really, really, really interesting person who sits at the intersection of a lot of these really fascinating conversations. Sorry, the scholar in me just came out.
Anyway.
They're a very interesting video essayist, and I recently watched one of their videos on dark romance, and they mentioned Wuthering Heights. Perfect timing for me. And they mention it in this sort of way that alludes to it being a dark romance. So, if you consider it to be a romance, understand that it's a much darker one. It is not your Pride and Prejudice. It is not your Sense and Sensibility. It is not your Emma. It's not Jane Austen. It's Emily Brontë. It's not even Charlotte Brontë. It's Emily. It's Emily. So, yeah, I don't see this book as a romance. This is giving just Greek tragedy, but like it's English. I say that it's poorly marketed because there are way too many people who think that this is comparable to a Pride and Prejudice and to a Sense and Sensibility. And if you want to talk about prose, if you want to talk about overall storytelling, if you want to talk about those things that I just said, sure. Like, I feel like it's fair to compare books based on how interesting they are, and I would argue that right now this book is far more interesting than Sense and Sensibility is at the moment. But also, I'm not trying to sit here and compare apples to oranges. Yes, this book is generally more interesting, but that's because it is a reality TV show here, baby. Like, this is Euphoria, pre-Euphoria. Like, it's just pure drama from start to finish. And by no means would I ever mistake this for a type of romance that sits in the same spaces as Jane Austen's work, which is meant to make you laugh and kick your feet. This, I think, is meant to make you go, oh god, like it. So that's what I mean by poorly marketed, or at least the conversations around this book, I think, are not as nuanced or well informed as they should be. And I'm saying that as somebody who just started reading the freaking book, so I could be the idiot here all along, who knows. But now I want to move on to the prose. Yay! Okay, there are a lot of...
notes.
But it's mostly just because I had a lot to say and I started writing as if I was writing an essay. But yeah. So, one of the pros is, much like Miss Austen, Miss Emily Brontë is hilarious. This book has some of the most psychotic characters I've ever met straight off the bat. Like, nobody seems to like each other. Everybody is beefing with somebody. And everybody, like, says things that are just like, oh my gosh, why would you say that to somebody? Like, Nellie at one point is like, she is constantly talking about how I have no sympathy for that raggedy bitch ass kid, or like, I have no sympathy for Miss Catherine, she's a loser. Like, she is just, the ways in which she will just immediately switch up on somebody and be like, L. But then also be like, oh my gosh, my companion, my friend, my confidant. Like, she is so funny. And then you have Heathcliff, who is constantly saying just a barrage of crazy things to people. And there's one point where he is sulking and he's like, I need to figure out a way how to get back at that loser Hindley. And Nellie is like, no, we must forgive because God says so. And Heathcliff is like, I'm not trying to hear any of that noise. I hate this man. I need to get his ass. And this is coming from a 14-year-old who was talking about like a 20-year-old. That's funny. So this book begins with an introduction to some of the most unpleasant folk that you will ever find in a book, ever. Heathcliff, Hareton, Catherine II, because there are two Catherines, but this is Catherine II, Joseph, Nellie, and Mr. Locke. Shout out to the girl who can't count on her fingers, and Mr. Lockwood. This then goes into Nellie telling the story of Wuthering Heights and how Heathcliff came to be its sort of like Lord, Master, Overseer. He is the owner of Wuthering Heights, I think. It's been a while since I read like the first two chapters, but I'm pretty sure the deed is in his name. So, and most of the characters are atrocious, like up until chapter 7. But it's fun. It's like so funny, except for Hindley. Hindley is an abusive piece of shit. Do not like him. What I find particularly delightful is the presentation of the children. They are a particular like interest to me at this point because the book is currently talking about their lives as children, the lives of the people of Wuthering Heights before Mr. Lockwood got there, and them as kids, right? Except for Hindley. Unless he's like just an older kid. I don't know. But like one of the ways in which the children are described, get this. Isabella, I believe she is 11, a year younger than Kathy, lay screaming at the farther end of the room, shrieking as if witches were running red-hot needles into her skin. Edgar stood on the hearth, weeping silently, and in the middle of the table sat a little dog, shaking its paw and yelping, which, from their mutual accusations, we understood they had nearly pulled it in two between them.
The idiots!
That was their pleasure, to quarrel who should hold a heap of warm hair, and each begin to cry because both, after struggling to get it, refused to take it. We laughed outright at the petted things. We did despise them. When would you catch me wishing to have what Catherine wanted, or find us by ourselves, seeking entertainment in yelling and sobbing and rolling on the ground, divided by the whole room? I'd not exchange for 1,000 lives my condition here. This is Heathcliff, by the way, who is literally getting, like, beat every other day for just being a kid. But he says, I'd not exchange for 1,000 lives my condition here for Edgar Linton's at the Thrushcross Grange. Not if I might have the privilege of flinging Joseph off the highest gable and painting the house front with Hindley's blood. He is like 14 years old. That's hilarious. The way that this boy talks is... Foot cameo. The way that he talks is hilarious. But he is also very interesting as a character. It is very easy to feel for him. The way that he is tormented into hating himself, the way that people talk about him, really makes you feel bad for him. Not just because he's a kid, but also because he's coded in a very specific way. He's coded as a character of color, and the narrative voice that surrounds him leads us to believe that not only is he a crash out, because he is, but he is a very believable child. with the circumstances that he is under, it is so easy to empathize with him and understand why he is the way he is. So at one point, he goes up to Nellie and he says, "Nellie, make me decent. I'm going to be good." Because up till this point, he has this long history of being a bit of a shit. But in a way that kids normally are. Like, he's not doing anything particularly crazy. He's just not liked by the young Earnshaw, aka Hindley. And Nellie is trying to hype him up and be like, "Oh great, we can make you look fantastic, and just so you know, you're gonna look so much better than Edgar Linton. Like, he's got nothing on you, and like, you can knock him over if you wanted to because you're bigger and badder than him, even though you're younger." And like, Heathcliff is like, well, he says, "But Nellie, if I knocked him down 20 times, that wouldn't make him less handsome or me more so." Smart kid. "I wish I had light hair and fair skin, and was dressed and behaved as well, and had a chance of being as rich as he will be." And that is where the turning point started for me, where Heathcliff went from being a badass jit who made me laugh to a child that I was re-recognizing is just a child. Like, he is a kid that has been thrust into this foreign world of which hates him. Everybody here, except for the old master, Mr. Earnshaw, Hindley's father, Catherine's father, everybody here hates him. Nobody treats him like a proper person except for Catherine and Nellie only more recently. And it is heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to see that, and knowing that it boils down to his lack of status, his orphan status, and the fact that he is probably a person of color. The prose here has a distinct way of pulling you in as well as setting you off. To the first time modern day readers, some of the language against Heathcliff might be difficult to digest, such as the slurs that he is called and the different, just very incredibly negative language used against him. He is referred to as a savage, this sort of vagabond in a very negative way, like literally the word vagabond, and an animal. He is referred to as an it by Nellie at the beginning, and it is heartbreaking and terrible to see because it's not the regular way in which babies are dehumanized, because he's not a baby at this point. He is an identifiable young boy, and he is being referred to as an it. And I would argue that even the dehumanization of babies kind of sucks, but it was more customary for the time to say, "Oh, it, the baby, it, go get it," you know. Whether or not you agree with that sucking or not, it is pretty obvious that it sucks that Heathcliff, as a young boy who could hear and understand what people were saying about him, was being referred to as anything but human. So this language can be hard to digest, but the language also makes his character and the nature of his situation feel more earnest and feel more real. It's not fun to see the ways in which characters are mistreated simply for being people of color and that otherness that they experience from that. But the collaboration of Bronte's prose, the dialogue of the surrounding characters, and Heathcliff himself, his dialogue, helps to create a fuller characterization of him. He is not tokenized by this language. He is not tokenized by his own monologuing or the monologuing of any other character who talks about him, because Heathcliff does not readily conform to the system of oppression under which he exists. He crashes out every single time. He does not allow people to talk down to him without him plotting against them or some other form of crashing out. Granted, part of this is attributed to his childish nature because he's like 14, but nevertheless, it is refreshing to see a boy of color act out when people who are obnoxious hurt him. It's nice to see him sort of plot against them, and at least it is to me. Not because it's morally correct, because many could argue that he should not be acting this way, but because it's different. Like, it's simply interesting to see him say, no, I will not take this. And as far as I'm concerned, that is a Bronte sister attribute with their main characters, because if I'm not mistaken, Charlotte Bronte has a very similar characterization of Jane Eyre in her book. So good on them for being little twinsies with that. Except Jane Eyre is not insufferable like all the characters in this book, apparently. But yeah, Heathcliff literally thinks he's Batman, and that is just very entertaining. Anyway, that's it for now. Thank you for listening. I'm going to go.